HarperCollins presents Where There's Muck, There's Bras, the true story of some of the North's most amazing women, written and read by Kate Fox. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Queens of the North. Cartimandua was a northern queen, more powerful and cannier than Boadicea. What made one stay in the memory and the other disappear? An unsculpted statue cannot crumble. An unpainted portrait cannot fade. A memory cannot be forgotten if it was never made. I wondered if it was just the chip on my shoulder. The fat, greasy chip shop chip that seagulls love chip on my shoulder that meant I noticed notable women in all sorts of fields were always being described as not as well known as you'd think, underrated or forgotten. The chip on my shoulder that meant when I trained as a radio newsreader, hoping to work for northern radio stations, I was told I sounded too northern. Or the one that weighed me down when I noticed a lot of people who worked in writing and broadcasting couldn't get their head round the fact I lived in the north and worked in writing and broadcasting. "Have you travelled down today?" they'd ask in shock when they realised I really didn't live in London, as if suddenly realising there actually were roads and railway lines, possibly even aeroplanes, that went beyond the Watford Gap. Once I realised you really were less likely to be remembered by history or noticed in the present if you were northern or a woman, and the likelihood of not being remembered or noticed increases with every additional marginality you have, such as being from an ethnic minority, disabled, or LGBTQI+, I felt distinctly miffed about this exclusion. I wanted to make a fuss, but there's a catch-22. It's not very northern to make a fuss. In fact, if a certain Russian punk feminist band were from the north, they'd have to be renamed Pussy Kerfuffle. But basically, I didn't know if I should go on about it too much or who would care. Did it matter that if you asked people to name a northerner, they would almost certainly name a man first, and second, and third? Probably a man in the great tradition of northern curmudgeons, that is, men who must not ever betray that they are happy about anything or anybody, and who would say, even of an experience transporting them to their greatest height of transcendent beauty and euphoria, it were all right. Men like Geoffrey Boycott or Noel Gallagher or Michael Parkinson, who so northern is even named after a northern type of ginger cake. As I toured round the north, I realised that some places call it parkin and some call it ginger cake. At least that's not as divisive as the bread roll, which might be a bap, or a barm cake, or a stotty, or an oven-bottomed muffin, or a bun, or a tea cake. Audiences can get very passionate about this. More passionate than about class and gender regional inequalities, to be honest. Sometimes I lost all hope of us ever overcoming our intra-northern differences and developing a united identity. Pan-northern is not just a kind of northern casserole, I wanted to say. Then, first a ripple, then a wave of activity began around the centenary of women getting the vote, which meant that money was made available to councils around Britain to celebrate women who had contributed to the cause. A fifth of that was awarded to a statue project in London. But no, I'm not making a fuss, not me. Along with the Me Too movement and the campaigns of feminist activists such as Caroline Criado Perez, who successfully campaigned for Jane Austen to be the first woman, apart from the Queen, celebrated on a banknote, and Laura Bates, who pointed out that only 15% of statues in the UK were women, this wave coincided with women in history being taken more seriously and recognised as more likely to have been erased from the records than men. Then came the Festival of the North, an idea of George Osborne, then Chancellor of the Exchequer, to showcase the culture of the Northern Powerhouse. A catchy title, which is not actually the nightclub in Barnsley it sounds like. It's an initiative to help the North's economy catch up to that of London and the South East.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?